Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you for coming to this year's Planet of the Grapes event and of course the wine talk discussion we're going to have today. So my name is Heidi, I work for Viinitie and I have a great pleasure of having one of the most interesting people in the wine, according to me, obviously my very non-biased opinion, Robert Joseph here with me. We go back a few years personally, mostly by drinking Negronis all around the world with Robert, but there's a lot of other things he's done during his life, of which you will hear a tiny fraction today. Robert is, he's been around the block a few times, so he's done a lot of things in the wine world, but maybe it's time for me to ask you, Robert, give us a little pitch, like who is Robert Joseph?
Thank you for asking. The Negronis is true, by the way. I've had probably a more varied background than most people in this industry. Can I just say before we do that, thank you all for taking the time to come up here rather than taste the wonderful wines downstairs. So I really appreciate that. And please also be ready to argue, question. It's not a big room, so we can all hear what everybody says. So my background, very, very quickly, if I can do it in 1 minute. My parents owned a hotel. I grew up in the world of wine service, food service. I went to live in Burgundy for nearly 5 years. I knocked around with a lot of producers in the days when it wasn't as easy to sell Côte d'Or Burgundy as it is today. I worked with a broker called Becky Wasserman, and I was lucky enough to be able to go to wineries like Lafon and Roumier and so on almost every week. Those days are long gone. And then I came back to the UK, started a magazine, wine magazine, started a newspaper column, wrote a number of books, started the International Wine Challenge, and that kind of sort of usual thing. For about 20 years I was a wine critic, very obsessed with why this wine is different to that one. What you're going to do downstairs we've already been doing, why is this Rioja like this and that Rioja like that? Very interesting. And then in 2005, 20 years ago, the magazine and the competition were sold. I had the option of doing something different. And I thought, now I really wanted to see about making wine. I thought I could buy an estate, and I worked out that I couldn't afford to buy the wine estate I would want to buy. And also a lot of the people I knew who had wine estates were struggling to pay the bills. So I thought, why could we not make a new world-style wine? I was fascinated in some of the brands that were coming out of Australia, California, New Zealand in those days to the UK, but also elsewhere. And we didn't have those kinds of brands in France or anywhere in Europe very much. Torres is maybe an exception, if you like, to that rule. So I thought I would do that, and I was also fascinated, and I always have been, not just in why this wine tastes different to that wine, but why he buys this one, she buys that one, and tomorrow he might buy that one and she might buy this one. What is it that makes us all buy and drink and like the wines we do? It isn't necessarily because Robert Joseph, as a critic, told you that this was a good one. So that became really a driving thought for me. And in the wines that I got involved in making, which you'll see some of today, these are all wines where I have been thinking of the consumer, and I've been thinking of different consumers in different moments, and that you will see very much. So I'd like you, when you're tasting these wines, and listen to what you're saying, think about their place in people's lives beyond, is it a good wine, is it not a good wine, is it typical of this or typical of that? How does it? It's like movies. There are great movies of all sorts of different styles. You don't go and see the Bond movie in the same way as you'll go and see a Fassbinder movie in the same cinema the next day. So I look at wine a little bit like that.
Fantastic, thank you, Robert. So as usual, you'll find the list of beverages that we're going to have on the tasting list. It's on page 28 at the bottom. We don't guide you going through these wines, so feel free to taste from left to right in that order whenever you like. We will discuss some of these wines and some of these topics behind these wines, obviously with Robert, but feel free to taste and sip and pour and drink whenever you feel like it.
I think everyone's got the list, haven't they, in front of them?
Yes, exactly, yeah. So you might wonder why this wine talk is called Devon's Advocate. It is a column that Robert is writing for the Meiningers International with his two horns on the pictures. And, you know, you've been previously editor-in-large, you know, meaning basically you can write whatever interests you. But are you why are you devil's advocate? Are you there just to cause disturbance, or are you a restless child?
If I ask everybody who is your greatest inspiration, who do you think has made you who you are today and the way you work and so on, everyone will have a different person. I will say that 20 years ago, or maybe a little bit less than 20 years ago, it was my son who was born in 2005. Because, like a lot of kids, he was very good at asking one question, why? And every time I gave him an answer, he would give me another question, which was, and why that? And he also sometimes asked that other question, why not? And I became more and more aware that in the wine industry, that's not what we do. Why are all these bottles in 75-centiliter glass? Why is champagne all white? Why do we say extra dry on a wine that's sweeter than the one that says brut? There are so many. Why is it right to make rosé and champagne by blending red and white, but we can't make rosé still wine? What is the logic for that? Why do we pay so much more for wine from Margaux than we do from Moulis? Are we really saying that those wines from Margaux are all better than the wines from Moulis? Or we could say Napa or Messina or whatever. There are, and all these questions, to me, very often if you ask one question, and my background is in journalism, all you do is you end up getting an answer that raises another question. So my role as a devil's advocate, and I don't know if you know what the devil's advocate was, his job, always a man, was to actually tell the Pope why somebody should not be a saint. And that was then the Pope's job to decide, yeah, I've listened to you, but he or she still gets to be a saint. All I'm trying to do every week in the column in Meiningers is to make people think about wine a little bit differently. And if they still think what they thought before, having read what I've written and thought about it, that's fine. But it's not, I think this because I've always thought it. So we have appellations. We're creating appellations every day. Why? Is there a rationale? You know, those sort of things, and you can come back and say, yeah, here's a rationale. And quite often I change my views, as you'll see over time. But I change my views because people have read what I've written and said, yeah, but.
Brilliant. So in glasses number 1 and 3 from the left, we have a brand called Le Grand Noir, which you can, you already mentioned that you wanted to start creating like European-based brand, but with that kind of new world, less restrictive way. And the first glass actually is a non-alcoholic wine. So can you give us a bit of a background further to Le Grand Noir, and what's your take on this non-alcoholic?
In reverse order, it is not a non-alcoholic wine. It is a wine-based non-alcoholic beverage. So before anybody gets at me and says, don't call it wine, it isn't wine, right? Start from here. But then again, there are a lot of products out there, like wine in bourbon barrels, which we see from the US, which I don't think should be called wine either, and they are. So there's a question there. The concept of Le Grand Noir began, I'd already said that I wasn't going to buy a little estate somewhere because I couldn't do that. I wanted to create a branded wine. And my first thought, and I'll admit this, was to make a Bordeaux. I wanted to make a non-vintage, multi-region Bordeaux, and my little, tiny ambition was to make a Moet and Chandon level, character, reliable, annual, non-vintage wine in Bordeaux. Because I don't believe Mouton Cadet, which is the brand that is best placed to do that, doesn't. I don't criticize my competitors very often, but I think Mouton Cadet should be a better wine than it is. So I started talking to people in Bordeaux, and the reason why that product that I wanted to make 20 years ago does not exist was I had two problems. On the one hand, I had the potential clients who said, actually, people don't want a non-vintage, easygoing, reliable Bordeaux. People who want to buy Bordeaux want the Chateau, and they want all these things. Well, fair enough. But the other problem, which was a bigger problem, was the Bordelais. They were too much of a pain to deal with, to be brutal. So after doing that, at the same time, I then moved along the coast to Minervois, in Languedoc, and we met these wonderful people at this winery called Cédric Jean Galibert, the biggest set of cooperatives in the Minervois region. young then, 20 years ago, but they were young, cool, keen, ready to try new things. I remembered what it was like dealing with Australia in the 1980s as a journalist then, where the Australians were saying, hey, here's our new Chardonnay, what do you think of it? Should we have more oak or less oak or whatever? And these guys were exactly the same. They had 6,000 hectares of land and they really wanted to try something new. We wanted to do that too. We came along and said, right, what we want to do is we want to make a red wine that's a Cabernet Syrah blend. They said, okay, nobody's asked to do that before. We have Syrah, we have some Cabernet, but we've not put them together. And then the neighbors said, well, if you do that, you'll go bust. Nobody wants a Cabernet Syrah from Languedoc. So we realized very quickly that we were not thinking the same way as everybody else. We became the black sheep. That is why there's a black sheep on the label, the Grand Noir. We were called Mouton Noir for about a week, and then we received a letter from a chateau in Bordeaux that didn't like it, so we changed. And the white was equally groundbreaking, and you may see that as well, which was the Chardonnay of Vionier. So the first thing was making wines differently. The second thing was thinking about wanting to make wine with a champagne concept. What's the difference in champagne concept? What Moet and Chandon, or Krug, if you like, are trying to do is to give you a reliable experience. Every time you have a glass of non-vintage Krug, you should have the same experience as you had the last time. And that's across the champagne. They have vintage wines as well, but even those are stylistically follow a line. But in wine, we think, oh no, we have to reflect the vintage. Why? What proof is there that the ordinary person wants to taste the cold, rainy year? Or wants to taste the really hot, raisiny year? Do they want that in everything else? When they go to buy a pizza, they buy the same pizza every time. They buy perfume, they buy the same perfume. I'm not saying that we don't want to have vintage variation on in wines, and in champagne they do that, as I said, but people also want a reliable product. What working with this estate gave us was the ability to take grapes from 50 meters right there up to 350 meters on different kinds of soil. So we have gravel, we have chalk, we have sand, we have a bit of everything. So what we started to make was not what you'll hear everybody else talk about, which is vin de terroir. What I think we're making is vin des terroirs. Now the word terroir means nothing to 90% of the people walking down the street. But in terms of us as professionals, what I'm saying is this is a wine that has been put together, each of the wines, from different parts of the estate, and every year we're trying to hit a particular target, and that's why we do the Chardonnay of Vionier, because I think the Vionier is bringing something to Chardonnay, and that's why we do the Syrah Cabernet. Why are we doing a zero alcohol? You wondered whether I'd forgotten that part, and I hadn't, because I have friends, not many, but I have some friends, none of them yet, no. But actually you're not in this list of friends.
I'm the one who drinks.
But I have a number of friends, and family and friends and other people, who, for one reason or another, sometimes do not want to drink alcohol. There are all sorts of reasons. And what do they drink? And wine people say, well, they can drink soft drinks, they can drink juice, they can drink water. And you go, why? They want to eat meat, they want to eat a meal, they want something to go with their meal. There are times where, that they don't want Coca-Cola, they don't want orange juice. And the beer companies have understood this, and they're making really good non-alcoholic beer. The spirits companies, we have some great vermouths. Wine has invested almost nothing in zero alcohol, with a few exceptions. So Torres is a good exception. But as an industry, we have not invested. And wine is much more difficult. It's a much more complex product. And we have 13% alcohol to start with, rather than 3, 4, 5% or whatever. So we are starting a process. It's a bit like NASA having gone to the moon a long time ago, and we're saying, hey, let's think how we can get to the moon. So I'm going to say very frankly, and I really want to hear what you guys think about this first glass. This is work in progress, and there are some other non-alcoholic, wine-based alcoholic beverages downstairs, and I am fascinated. So I'm not saying that we have got to the moon or landed there or anything else. I think we're all on a journey. But what I do know is that the statistics say that this is a category that is growing. I'm also going to make a non-alcoholic sparkling tea in Georgia this year. And that's another way of looking at it. But anyone who says that wine people should not be looking at alcohol-free should be questioning, why do the beer people do it? Why are the spirits people doing it? Why is everyone else doing it? What makes wine
so special that it can't play this. However, and by the way, anybody who says this non-alcoholic Le Grand Noir is not as good as the conventional Le Grand Noir, no, it isn't, because it isn't easy to make wine and take the alcohol out and get to the same thing. How many decaffeinated coffees are really as good as the best coffee with caffeine? And it's much easier to do the decaffeination bit. All it is it's competing with other zero alcohol products. It's a zero alcohol adult drink. And that's my target. And that's what we're trying to shoot for.
Talking of competition in the alcoholic beverage world, IWSR, as you know, has said that 10 years going to 2028, the global wine consumption is going to decrease 20%. Now, I know that you've written about this a lot, how much we should crop up some vineyards because there's too much wine produced in the world. So can you share your thoughts with the group here, please?
Yes, and behind that is the question of why it's happening, I guess. We've had wine for 8,000 years, so it's going to be okay. Yeah, great. Anybody tell me how we've been treating women for the last 8,000 years, or most of it, until relatively recently? Anyone want to tell me how we treated children and sent them out to work until relatively recently? There's lots of things we've had for 8,000 years that we do not necessarily want to go on having today. So history is not necessarily the only guide. Let's start from there. We live in different ways to the ways we lived before. We had a family unit, quite possibly if you're Italian with the grandparents as well. But you have a family unit, everybody sits down and everybody eats the same food. And if you don't want to eat the meat, you go leave the table, you have no dinner. And you're old enough to have some wine, drink your wine. Okay, we'll put some water in it, but you drink it. You have what you have. That's how it was. By the way, those were also the days when it was perfectly okay to smoke in front of the children while you're eating your dinner. It was also the days where you laughed at the vegetarians. And you gave a dinner party, and if one of the people at your dinner party came with someone of the same sex as their partner, oh, really? What do we do? Where do we put them? How do we seat them? Oh, we're not comfortable. We've moved on from there. We don't smoke in front of the kids or at the table. We accept the partnerships that our friends have, and we accept the fact that one of our friends came with a guy this week, and last year he was with a girl, and what will happen next year? We accept that, and we accept the fact that our children do not necessarily want to eat meat, or do not necessarily want to drink alcohol. And not just our children, our friends, because there are lots of reasons. And the thing about alcohol is we see all this stuff, and at the moment there is a paranoia. It's not paranoia, it's real in a sense, in America, about cancer. The risk of cancer is going to go up if you drink wine. It is, but it's not that much. You've got a risk of cancer, and the risk you've already got is going to be a bit more. So, you live with the risk or you don't. There are certain kinds of cancer, breast cancer, where it is probably more significant, almost certainly. Others where it probably isn't. Oh, wine is going to make you live longer. Maybe. Well, maybe you live happier anyway, so, but the average 25 or 30-year-old, I do not believe, is thinking about cancer. And I do not believe they're thinking about whether they're going to live to 85 or 88. They're thinking about their health tomorrow morning when they go to the gym. They are thinking about the fact that they want to run every day and they're not running as well today. And guess what? They're wearing watches. They're wearing wristbands that are telling them why. And they are saying, last night you went out for a few beers. And you're just not as good today. And by the way, you didn't sleep as well last night. That is what I call well-being. It's not health. That's an awareness that we've got. The second thing is that these products are getting better. The beer's already done it. So suddenly I don't have to sacrifice a pleasurable experience by drinking a Heineken or a Guinness with alcohol. With wine, we're not there yet. I'm being very honest about this, but we're heading there. But the person sitting next to me at dinner isn't eating meat tonight. And do you know what? Their vegetarian dish looks pretty damn good. And actually it looks a bit better than the meat I'm eating. Actually, maybe I'll order that. You try it on a plane. Have you never seen how much better the vegetarian food is sometimes? So that's becoming more socially acceptable, what I call the social license. And thirdly, we have other non-alcoholic beverages coming along. I mentioned sparkling tea, there's kombucha, there's proxies, there's all sorts of other things. So put all of these things together, and wine is complex. And it's the stuff our parents drank. So for younger people, that's less attractive. All of that moves you towards a certain point. But there's something else that we also need to do, just looking at the statistics. Number one, why have the figures gone down? Because the French and the Italians, who were drinking extraordinary amounts of wine, are drinking less. They were drinking 80, 100 litres, and it came down to 40. So there's a point at which nobody is going to drink as much as they used to, number one. But secondly, we then had China. And about 2006, 7, 8, we thought, oh, China's going to get on the wagon, and they're going to be drinking lots and lots. And we saw a great growth in wine consumption. What we didn't, we saw a sort of flat period of wine consumption, which was the Chinese making up for what we weren't drinking. 2017, the Chinese stopped. And today the Chinese are drinking less than they were in 2006. And by the way, the Australians, and it isn't to do with tariffs on the Australians, that came in 2 years later. So the Australians were still throwing wine into China at the time the Chinese were drinking less. There is no evidence that the Chinese fell in love with wine. We all think, oh, wine's wonderful, we love it, give it to people, they'll love it. There's a lot of people who do not fall in love with wine, and they don't fall in love with the wine we give them. And in my country, in Britain, we fell in love with wine, for many, many, many people, via Matthias Rosé and Lieframa. Easy, soft, sweet drinks that we wine people are really rude about. Because it's not wine. Wine is dry. Wine is red normally, and it's dry, and it has tannin, and it has acids, and it goes with food. No, not all that stuff. That's like Coca-Cola. Yeah, people liked it. It turned people onto wine. I think when we go back to China, today, I think Prosecco, I think Moscato, I think all sorts of easy-to-drink wines are going to do better in China than the bad red Cabernet Sauvignon style wines, Bordeaux and others. But put all these together, it's a long answer to your question, but I think we've got a perfect storm. By the way, apart from all that stuff, we have the other side, which is climate change is making production more difficult, water is going to be harder and harder to come by, and labor is a major problem. And why are we putting up vineyards? Well, one reason is that we can't find the people to work in the vineyards. And by the way, if you're in America, the man who's about to become president today is going to send back lots of people who are doing it. But our sons and daughters are not stupid. They look at us and say, hey, Mum, Dad, how much are you making out of this wine thing? Not that much. Well, I don't want to go out and prune vines in January. It's no fun, and I can't employ anyone else to do it. Let's sell it. So we are losing one Bordeaux Chateau every day. We had 20,000 in the 1980s, we have maybe 5,000 today, and they're just swallowing each other up or pulling up the vines. We've started talking about pulling up vines in Bordeaux. Nobody is talking about Rioja, but it's coming. Germany is coming. Even, I'm told, even in Luxembourg, I'm told, it's pulling up vines. We know about California, we know about Australia. Your figures, I think we're talking the same things. Anywhere between 10 and 20% of the world's vines are going to come out over the next 10 to 20 years. And one of the biggest pieces of information I'm going to put on the table, I was just discussing this with one of the Rioja producers downstairs. Pernod Ricard, one of the biggest drinks companies in the world, has just sold all of its wine assets, apart from its champagnes and its Saint Marguerite Rosé from France. Why didn't it hold on to the Marguerite Rosé? Because that's a profitable business. But they sold Branco Estate, they sold Jacob's Creek, and they sold Campo Viejo. Campo Viejo is a really good brand. It's Rioja, everybody knows it. It's the biggest Rioja brand. They were really happy to be rid of it. All of those brands represented 5% of Pernod Ricard's turnover. So it's tiny, but it's taking a lot of effort, a lot of work. So if you are looking at, if you look at any business, look at Procter & Gamble, and they say, actually, we're not going to make that toothpaste anymore. You look at the toothpaste category and say, well, maybe there's something happening in toothpaste. So if they're saying we don't want to make Rioja anymore, look at Rioja and say, well, is there something going on? Well, there is something going on. They're going to rip out a lot of vineyards.
So, are there any winners in this situation?
Yes, well, I hope so, because, by the way, the other biggest, just to answer that question, I'll come back to you. The elephant in the room is the elephant downstairs in that room, which is there are a lot of really well-chosen good wines down there, and I defy anyone to get around that room and taste every single wine and take notes and do it diligently in the time they have available. But that is a fraction of what's out there. At the moment, in the US market, there are 300,000 different wines out there. How does anybody find their way through that? So, in answer to your question, brands. Brands, strong brands, as in spirits, as in beer, as in cars, as in hotels, will come through. Wine has not been good at branding. Lots of reasons for that. I'm leaving champagne out, I'll leave the fortifieds out, but basically champagne was branded almost from day one. There were posters advertising champagne. Most of wine has always been about, I make good wine, it will sell itself. People will find their way to me. I will be nice to some journalists and critics. They will tell people they will find their way to me. It doesn't work like that. If we go back to René Descartes, the Frenchman, basically the philosopher who said, he is a winemaker, he is a wine merchant. They do not actually do each other's job. That isn't how it works anymore. If you're an author or you're an artist, you have to go out and sell yourself. And so, strong brands that are in tune with the consumer will do well. And they will do well as the others fall over. So there will be a smaller, more profitable wine business. But can I quickly say something about money, which we don't ever talk about? This is not a very profitable business. We are all very, very good at saying, oh, I don't want to pay that much for this wine, I don't want to pay that much for that. That's your job to actually every day. But you've got to stop and think, what does it cost to make this stuff? Not only are we not making a big enough margin to be sustainable, but we're not making enough margins to build our brands. So, which are the successful brands in the wine world? Ooh, let's go to Provence. Let's look at Whispering Angel. Whispering Angel is profit on a stick. It doesn't cost that much to make rosé. The price is high. They spend a lot of money promoting Whispering Angel, and people are happy to buy Whispering Angel. There's an expression I use, BOLIP. I like not very nice acronyms. Bought like perfume. Nobody ever complains about the price of a Guerlain perfume or Chanel No. 5. Nobody ever complains about the cost of the skin cream that they believe is making their skin better, because they have bought into it. That is what brands like Krug have achieved. It's what wines like Cloudy Bay, Whispering Angel, and a lot of the wines you'll see downstairs have achieved. You are buying the brand. That's what I'm trying to do with my wines. These are certainly, the Grand Noir wines are, I think, at a very affordable price and designed to be. We'll talk about two of the other wines in a moment, which will be pricier. But to me, we need to stop being driven by price first. We need to think about the brand, the quality of the brand, and that, by the way, will begin to transcend some of the traditional ideas of place. So I think some Napa wines, some Bordeaux wines, and so on, which aren't necessarily as good as they pretend to be, will lose. And there'll be other regions, and Sicily is one of the places that's really proven that. There are places that we haven't thought of that are going to come through. But at the moment, I do some consultancy work in Moldova. If I ring up anyone, I'll leave you out of this picture, but I bring up anyone in the business and say, do you want to taste my Moldovan wines? Bulgaria, worse, right? Sorry guys, it's just not easy. Slovenia, maybe. Georgia, we're going to Georgia, yeah, maybe. But Eastern Europe is a kind of forgotten area. Because we'd much rather do Bordeaux or Chablis, or actually maybe because it's come up, Sicily. But Sicily is only now, it wasn't a few months ago, years ago. So I think strong branding with consumer resonance, and not what the wine industry has been. This is ironic because I'm doing it now, but I'm going to stop doing it in a second. Talking at rather than listening to. Your question?
I think you actually already asked my question. I was going to ask about, so where's the initiative coming to putting up the wine tasting more of a sort of business point of view that it's just not worth their time and money to have the wine to buy, I think already stuff.
I think one of the things, there's a nice lady called Priscilla Hennecombe who's got a thing online about rethinking the wine industry. And she's right, we do need to do a lot of rethinking. But her problem is, and she talks about Uber, and look at what Uber did. Uber was really simple in a sense, because nobody loved a particular taxi or taxi firm or whatever. Uber solved a problem. The wine industry is made up of so many different, it's atomized is the word. We've got lots of peasants, we've got business people, we've got aristocrats, we've got hobbyists, we've got corporations, and they're all making wine for different reasons in different ways. Nobody is going to make all of those people march to the same drum, and I've already told you that we're all drinking the wine for different reasons. So I don't think you can Uber it away, the wine industry. But look at La Vieille Ferme, which I think is one of the cleverest initiatives in recent years, from the people who brought you Chateau Beaucastel, also brought you Brangelina Rosé, or helped Brangelina. La Vieille Ferme is a brilliant, they're my neighbors in where I am, they're my competitors, but they have made wine buying very simple in very many ways, with the cockerel on the label and so on. But the fascinating thing about that, it's a head, not a cockerel. The fascinating thing about that brand is that when you buy La Vieille Ferme in France, it says Ventoux, AOC Ventoux, on the same label as the wine you buy in New York or London, which says Vin de France. So the Perrin family, who really understand terroir and everything else at Beaucastel, and various of their negociant wines from the Rhone, also understand that people in New York do not give a stuff about it coming from Ventoux, but people in France do. That, to me, is understanding the customer.
Fantastic. Let's go back to one of the questions you were asking as a devil's advocate. So you said, why do we put wine in a 0.75 litre glass bottle? Now, the second wine comes in PET. It's a 1 litre bottle of Greener Planet, and it's also similar to the third wine, which is a Chardonnay Viognier blend. This one is a Chardonnay Marsanne blend. Yeah. Who does that?
Well, the first thing I'll say about blending, and we'll come back to this with one of the other wines, sometimes I think I'm a bit bothered about this person. He's obviously a musician. I thought he was going to be God at one point. He's not. He's obviously a heavenly musician. But somebody spoke to the Moses of the wine world and says, hey, I've got some tablets for you. These are not tablets you take. These are stone tablets. And my tablet says that Chardonnay is always a standalone grape, unless it's making sparkling wine. Pinot, definitely, standalone. Nebbiolo, standalone. Sangiovese, no. Cabernet Sauvignon, not a standalone grape. It always goes with Merlot, right? Get that right, and maybe you could mix in some Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and put better. But that's what it is. Nothing else. And these rules came through, and Champagne always being white and so on. And we all, in France, that got written into legislation. But everybody, go to England, for goodness sake, the English wine industry, which I could talk about at length, and not necessarily in ways that make many English people happy. We're making wine in England with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Why? Why is that the recipe? Who said that sparkling wine, the only way to make wonderful sparkling wine, is the way they do it in one corner of France? Who is to say that there are not grapes in Italy, in Austria, in all sorts of other places where we could not make wonderful sparkling wine differently? And there are some great Zecks, for example, in Germany, that actually are pretty damn good. But we don't. We follow the Champagne model. We go to California, we make Cabernet Merlot. We make the Bordeaux style. So, to me, start in the blending bench. What tastes good? We did this, we started and saying, hey, we've got some Chardonnay, let's put this, and you keep going back and forth, and we ended up with this. Now, Marsanne is a grape that I really love. I think it's a fascinating grape from the Rhone. Not easy to sell Marsanne as Marsanne, but we found this blend work. Now that gives me the opportunity to give you one big prediction for the wine world. We are going to see more blends. And we're going to see more blends that do not say what they are on the label. The place that's been driving this is America, where you've got red blends in California, and the Prisoner is the most famous of those, but there are a lot of them. It's a very big sector. And it's a bit like an appellation in Europe. You're just buying the name, except that here it's the brand and the name of the wine rather than the region, because the region is very important in that. Why are we going to see more blends? Climate change. Every year we have a situation in which, oh my God, the Merlot is not working this year, or that grape is overripe or underripe or whatever, and what do? Secondly, Bordeaux, we're planting Touriga Nacional, we're planting other grapes, Masterland, and so on. But thirdly, we've got peaweeds. We're going to start using it. How many people want to buy a wine with the names of most of these peaweeds on it? We are going to move towards blends. But why are blends going to be good for the business? Appellations are very good in terms of giving you an idea of the style you're buying. But they don't, the big problem about them is that they are by definition commodity, they commodify the product. We're in a country here with a monopoly. What do monopolies do? They say, right, we're putting a tender out for Chablis. We're putting a tender out for Pinot Grigio. They want the best Pinot Grigio, the best Chablis they can get for the lowest price, which is great. As a wine critic, that was what I used to be looking for every week for my recommendations. Is that really good news for a Chablis producer or a Pinot Grigio producer whose neighbor may have cheaper land, cheaper labor, lower needs or whatever? No. Basically, the sensible, the clever people downstairs, Master Gasset, for example. Good example, a brand. You didn't buy Master Gasset because of the grape variety specifically, you bought it because of the style of that wine. That to me was a groundbreaking blended concept in France, and we're going to see more and more of those. So what we've got here is very much into the sustainable angle. It's a litre bottle, PET, unbreakable. We are also going to see more and more alternative packaging. The reason a bottle is 75 centilitres made of glass is because that was the lung capacity of a French glass blower 300 years ago. And that is crazy because we have walked on the moon, we have decoded the genome for God's sake, and we are still using glass bottles and putting little bits of wood in the top of them, and every now and then accepting that some of those bits of wood are spoiling the liquid in the bottle. Come on, people. So, no. Is the litre PET bottle the answer to everybody's prayers? Not necessarily. Is the square or really the flat bottle the answer? Not necessarily. What about the pouch? What about the bag-in-box? What about the cans? There are lots of things. But we have to stop putting, I really do believe this, cheap wine into glass bottles. Even when it's recycled, the cost of making the bottle, transporting the bottle, and recycling it is too high. We have to, whether we're taking the bottles back, which we do here in this country, which isn't done everywhere else, we need to, whether we're taking refillable glass bottles, or lots of different things. But in terms of the business, the Australians used to be the cleverest people in the wine world. And arguably you in the Nordics are now amongst the cleverest people in the wine world, which was they put all their cheap wine into bag-in-box. So basically, if it came in a box, what they called a cask, because they were clever enough not to call it a bag-in-box, they gave it a winey name, cask. It was inexpensive barbecue wine. If it came in a bottle, it was more serious. And that, to me, was a great model. It was 57% of Australian wine. Quite low by Nordic standards, I have to say. Now they're down to about 37%. They're putting quite cheap wine in glass bottles. We are still putting quite cheap wine in glass bottles in the Nordics and everywhere else. I would like a tax on packaging, which drives people selling cheap product, whatever it is, to say, well, I can't afford to put this into pretentious packaging, I'm going to rely on the product and the branding to sell it. And I think we're going to see more and more of that.
So last time we saw each other, I think we were in southern Sweden or Serbia, one of those. Anyway.
Both, I think.
Same, right? But the point here is that we were discussing your upcoming book.
Yep.
And it's about consumers in particular, but AI.
No.
More.
Well, yes and no. Most questions anybody ever asks me, I probably have a yes and no answer. Oh, the answer is yes and no. It's not about consumers, although consumers are a big part of it. It's called The Wine People. And there are 200 different personas men and women, well, in fact there's one non-binary amongst them, and they represent everything in the wine world from, and it depends which order, which direction you want to start. I happen to start with the consumer, and there are 30 odd of them, all different times, different characters, moving back through the people they bought the wine from, but that could be a sommelier, that could be a wine shop, it could be the traditional buyer, through the people who sell, who produce and sell, so the bulk seller would be in there, the broker would be in there, the producers of various kinds, but then all of the other people, I call the pillars of the wine industry, whom we never think about. Somebody designed the labels of all those wines downstairs. Some of those labels are going to be in your head for a long time, some of them are not. That label designer matters. Somebody created the website. Somebody is a storyteller. There are so many different elements. Somebody provided the yeast. Somebody provided the barrels. So there's 200 of those. And what I want to do is to really introduce a lot of people to the universe of wine, even within the wine industry. We are too slow to think about all of those, the importance of all of those people. Because if you take any one or a few of them out, the whole edifice falls down. So that's we're nearly finished. We're at design stage at the moment, and it will come up very quickly once that happens. But it is actually to ask you to imagine what his or her role is in this overall picture, and then look into the future, but also how they interact. So the book starts with a short little, almost like a short story of a day in which you see all of these people interacting, a lot of these people interacting with each other. There's a wine faker in there, for example. There's a wine investor. There's the big wine producer. There's the French big brand owner who buys a lot of wine from Spain. And there's the French terrorist, well, frankly, he's not a terrorist, he's a vigneron, but he's a terrorist on that day, who is out there actually getting to that tank, that Spanish tanker, and emptying the liquid out of that Spanish tanker. They're all part of the wine world.
And why did you get AI involved in this project?
Thank you, I'd forgotten that question. So the book is all 200 people, everything is written by me, except one. There's one text written by AI, and if you read the whole book, you'll have to find it for yourself, but at the end somewhere there's a revelation of which one. But the point of what I got the AI to do was to give me the images of these people. There are the 200 pictures, and you can see them. And without paying an awful lot of money to an illustrator or a lot of illustrators, I could never have achieved this. And I genuinely know these people. Each of them, there's like 300 or 400 words, and you don't get to know that much about them in that space, but I kind of have an idea of this person. I've seen them, I kind of idea where they might live, and the way they might live. And that's what I wanted to do with this. And again, what I want wine professionals to do is to have maybe more of that idea. We all know what the guy who made the wine that we're selling looks like, maybe, or maybe we don't. But how many of us think about the person who's drinking it? I love being in retail. I love standing in a Monopoly store or in a retailer elsewhere, watching people buying the wine, listening to them. What are they saying to each other before they pick this bottle up? Are they asking for advice? Probably not. Maybe they do. But all of that stuff.
All right, so last two wines in the glasses come from your newest project,
Yep.
which happens to take us to Georgia. Now, tell us, why did we go to Georgia? Why did you go to Georgia? And you were talking about blends already, and these are basically white blends and red blends, or as a blush. So, what's going on here?
Well, so the last white is the Chardonnay Viognier, and I did not want to make Burgundy in Languedoc because you can't make Burgundy in Languedoc, and what would be the point to me? So that wine, the Viognier is giving the floral, the apricot flavor, adds to the Chardonnay. You like it, you don't like it, there's a little bit of oak, but it's very much a blended concept. I've been going to Georgia since 1988. So go back to the days of Gorbachev and Glasnost and Perestroika and all that stuff. And I first tasted my first Kvevri orange wine then, and I thought it was disgusting. I don't know in retrospect if it was disgusting. All the people with me thought it was disgusting. I've tasted enough disgusting wines in Georgia to think it probably was. But it came out of a hole in the ground, and it was new. I then done some consultancy for wines of Georgia as a region, and I've kept going back, and I've been fascinated by all of the different grapes they've got, the history of the Kvevri amphora, and so on.
I've also been fascinated by the reverence that some people in the wine industry have gone, suddenly Georgia is the new god of wine. And all the naturalistas have embraced Georgia. By the way, any naturalistas in the room, I can tell you there's an awful lot of Georgian wine. There is A, made with cultured yeast, B, filtered, and it's very well made. But you know, the fact that Georgian winemakers get a free pass to every natural wine event makes some of my Georgian friends laugh. So put that to one side. Also, some of the Georgian grapes are fascinating. They've almost all got unpronounceable names. And actually, when you taste them by themselves, when they're made in stainless steel, which, by the way, most Georgian wine is, the Kvevries are about 4.5%, so just a tiny little bit. Most Georgian wine that's exported, by the way, is sweet red wine that goes to Russia and Poland. So, you know, not all the romantic stuff that we all hear about. But some of those grapes are not that exciting. Riccazzatelli, which is the most widely planted grape, to me is the equivalent of Trebbiano. There's some delicious Trebbiano. There's some downstairs, I think. But most Trebbiano is pretty ordinary, let's be honest. And Riccazzatelli is German. The Russians liked, or the Soviets liked Trebbiano, liked Riccazzatelli because it was productive and easy. The red grape, Saperavi, fascinating, black juiced, intense and so on. A lot of people are treating it again like the second coming. How many great Saperavis have I had? How many Saperavis have I had that really compete with a great Brunello, a great Bordeaux, a great Burgundy? It's doing something different, but the tannins can be a little bit too prominent. You know, you've got black skin grape, you've got the skins, you've got everything else. So I approach these wines, it goes back to the fact that I met a brilliant young winemaker. I've got a brilliant winemaker partner on the wines you've seen here, Hugh Ryman, who's one of the first flying winemakers. He started making wine all over the world aged 20, 21. Here I met this winemaker called Vladimir Kublashvili, who's 40-something years old, and now doing his diploma, wants to do Master of Wine, absolutely driven, passionate about wine, but totally open-minded. And I met him a few times, and then one day I was at a Provine, and he gave me a red wine, and he said, "So, what do you think of this?" And I'd never had anything. It was really wonderful. And I said, "It's brilliant. What's the great Aladasturi? What's that?" And he said, "Well, there's only about 60 hectares of it in the world. And I think it's quite interesting." I said, "Yes, great." He said, "Yeah, but it's not easy." He says, "What I did with these is I took the grapes and I hung them to dry for 10 days. Why? He said, "Well, it's a region of Georgia where it gets pretty humid and the grapes don't get ripe, and by the time they're getting ripe, the danger is they get rotten. So I pick them when they're as ripe as I can get them, and I'm just letting them dry for 10 days, which gives me about an extra degree, but it concentrates." So I thought, this is it. I really like you. You're my kind of winemaker. That wasn't a tradition in Georgia. He was taking Italian thinking. So we started to talk about making wine. That was 2019. COVID got in the way. But it took about 5 years, really, to last year, really, to get it together. So what you've got here, whether you like it or you don't like it, and I do want to hear what you think, is a total. When we started this project, we said, right, all bets are off. He makes Kvevri wine, he makes stainless steel wine, he's got some wine that goes into barrels. The owners of the winery have 1,600 hectares of vines across Georgia. So we were able to play with a wonderful palette. One of the best conversations I've had in wine, some of them have been the conversation I had with the Krugs over how they put together Krug, and some of the unfashionable vineyards they use and grapes for Krug. But by the same token, John Duval, when he was making Grange for Penfolds, was talking about this extraordinary palette and every year of how do you make Grange. So we started like that with no fixed idea of what we were going to do. There was probably going to be Riccazzatelli in there. There was probably going to be Kvevri in there, but we didn't know. Was it going to be 90% Kvevri, 10% Kvevri? And we worked back and forth, and in the end, you end up with like 13 different grapes, 11% Kvevri. But by the way, every year will be different. Also, every time we do it will be different. And of the grapes, which we've got the white to start with, all Georgian grapes, except for two. Now, this is a fascinating moment, and there's somebody downstairs with a wine that may fit into this picture, I don't know. But Vladimir, actually, he's a lovely guy, very gentle, quite very, very quiet sometimes. And he said, and we're blending, and he goes, we both think we're not there yet. Can we put some aligote in here? I go, why? Well, he's got 5 hectares of aligote planted, it's now growing. Yeah, okay. I lived in Burgundy. I have a low impression of aligote, let's be honest about this. I know you can pay $300 for a bottle of Le Roi aligote these days, but in goes 1%, 2%, 3%. Actually, 5% aligote in the blend. Wow. This is good. Okay, aligote is in. More blends, and then, right, okay, we think we're there. I said, okay, lardo, which is what Vladimir in Georgian. I said, okay, can we just take the aligote out now? Please, let's just see what happens with aligote. So we always say the aligote fought its way into the blend and held itself there. There's 1.7% of muscat. Everything else is Riccazzatelli, Mtsvani, Krachuna. On the back label, all of those. These come from across the east and west of Georgia. So, well, is it from Kakheti on the east, Imereti on the west? Very different. The west is more humid than the east, and so on. And as I said, 11% Qvevri, but also some grapes skin contacted in stainless steel, and then some wine in barrel. So really using all of those, blending, and mixing vintages. So going back to 2017. Why are you mixing vintages? Well, why shouldn't we? If they can do it for Krug, why can't we do it? If they can do it for Vega Sicilia, why can't we do it? But why in the wine industry is it only Vega Sicilia, one or two others, and Champagne that does multi-vintage? So we don't call it multi-vintage, we don't call it non-vintage, we call it assemblage.
I'm just curious to know if it's certain grapes that are older or you make the blend?
We make the basically we have different wines. So literally, we are putting together. It might be some Riccazzatelli from 2017, or it might be some Krachuna from 2018. They're just all components. They just go into them. To me, I love winemakers. Of course, I love winemakers. That's my whole life. I work with winemakers. But by the way, I love wine buyers. I love sommeliers. But you know what I also love? I love chefs. I love mixologists. There's somebody in a restaurant over there today who is making a dish that has never been made before. He is putting, or she is putting, flavors from Indonesia with flavors from France and Italy and whatever, and they're making something that we are going to go and enjoy. Who is doing that in wine? How many people in wine are doing what their father did, or what the marketing people are saying they should do? So if actually blending vintages works, why not do it? However, we are a dishonest, hypocritical industry. We didn't want to put ingredient listing on our wine because we are better than that. Food does that. We did. Our wine's healthy, it's this, it's that. Okay. Now, this bottle of wine, here's my Cabernet Sauvignon from Delhi. Is it really Cabernet Sauvignon? Yeah, of course it is. Does it have anything else in it? Oh, 15%. Where does it say that? Well, I don't say that. The law says I can put Cabernet Sauvignon with 85%, 50%. Unless, of course, I'm in somewhere I can do 75%. Or unless I'm someplace I can do 50% in America. I can say American wine or whatever. That's crazy. People are buying 2023 Cabernet Sauvignon. They are getting one glass in that bottle, nearly one glass in that bottle. It may not be 2023 Cabernet Sauvignon, and we think that's okay. I don't think it's okay. So on the wines that we do in Le Grand Noir, yeah, we say Chardonnay on the front label, but on the back it says Chardonnay Viognier. And we actually say what we've got. In this, it's a blend of vintages and grapes. We say what the vintages are of each grape and where they come from. And so that's the white. So what I want the white to do is to have some Qvevri character. I hope you can tell me whether you can get it or not, but I want it to be Georgian. I don't want it to be an international, non-whatever wine.
The red has slightly fewer grapes. It's only got 9 different grapes only. This is again back to the why not story. This is unique. They're both unique in terms of the blend of vintages and so on. What's unusual here, we co-fermented the Saperavi with Riccazzatelli and Mazzani. Why did you do that? Okay, guys, let's go and see Mr. Gigal, shall we? Mr. Gigal, why do you co-ferment your Côte Rôtie? Because it's what you do, it makes very good wine. Actually, Mr. Dupont, your Hermitage, why do you not co-ferment an Hermitage? Oh, well, we don't, because we don't. They used to co-ferment Chianti. They used to co-ferment Rioja. It used to be common in lots of places. Now, it was often done because the wines were too tough, and okay. And a lot of places make very good wine without doing it. But that's not to say that it was wrong. And lots of us say, oh, isn't it great, tradition? We love tradition, except that we don't. We only have these little islands of tradition like Côte Rôtie. So Saperavi, to me, can make quite rustic wines. How do you actually prevent a wine making rustic, a grape making rustic wines? Well, how about co-fermenting it? We did 5 different blends in our first test, and in fact, I rang, I WhatsApped Vladimir and said, look, you're busy, you're dealing with 1,600 hectares of vines. If you're too busy, let's not do 5. The one I believe in is Kisi, which is a great grape, one of the interesting grapes in Georgia. Let's focus on the Kisi and maybe Quacuna, which is another grape I like a lot. And let's not bother with the Riccazzatelli, which I think I've told you is a little bit Trebbiano-like. Let's do 2. And he comes back and says, no, I'll do 5. I go there, we do a blind tasting 2 or 3 times. The 2 winners are Riccazzatelli and Mazzani, and the absolute loser is the Kisi. So my instinct of what would work was completely wrong. Now maybe next year we might try it in a different way, it might work differently or whatever. So what you've got here is that co-ferment, or 2 co-ferments. You've got other grapes that you may or may not have come across in Georgia, which include the air-dried grapes. Other grapes that we actually pick off by hand because you get hens and chickens, you get little grapes. And so a huge amount of work has gone into that. And there's only foreign grape in there is 5% Merlot. Merlot, not my favorite grape, by the way. And again, it just fitted into the wine. And tomorrow, Heidi's going to taste our first rosé, which made 1,000 bottles. And again, we're broken various roots of that. You like these wines, you don't like these wines. They are an expression of what Vladimir and I have been trying to do. And if I do nothing else, I hope that a few people are going to look at what we've done here and say, hey, well, we could try this, we could try something else, we could try something different. I don't know what our timing is, but I would like to hear, have you got another question, or we?
No, I'm just going to wrap up, so...
Can we just do we have enough time for a few questions, please? Or comments? So, listen, my background as a critic was saying what I did and didn't like, and actually sometimes I did tell winemakers what I didn't like to their faces. So firstly, I am not going to be bruised on any comments you have that are negative about any of these wines. I'd also be interested to hear, obviously, about any positive thoughts you have, and also any questions or comments, until Heidi tells us we have to leave. So, please.
Do we already have some of your wines in the restaurants here in Finland?
No, these ones are not available in Finland, mostly because we're still arguing about the price.
I think you were talking about the Georgian wines or the French wines.
Yeah, sorry, the Georgian wines are not here. So the Grand Noir, the Green Planets, they are available through Viinitie, obviously, and you can taste a broader range downstairs. Yeah.
And approximately prices.
Georgian wines, we're not there yet. you can tell me what you would pay.
Maybe the French wine prices are in the book.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to price in a moment, but keep going. And other comments. I mean, actually, do you like them? And that's really the question. Do they stand on a table? At what level do they stand on a table? That's really where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I really like it because they're a little bit, like you said, unique. Other kind of wines that you don't normally drink.
Yeah, drinking is probably what we were there for, so I take that.
Yeah, but people are.
Yeah.
But people, I work in a small wine bar, and I have the last like 2 months people asking about the Jordan wines. Can you take in Jordan wines? Can you get where will you get them? which importer have Jordan wines?
My answer for this wine is, and again the price may be an issue, but we'll come back to that in a second. What I want this to be is an entry, not entry level, because that suggests price, but an entry to Georgian wines, and as much as this is less of a challenge than a Kfevri orange wine. And in terms of price, what I want to do is, and what's interesting to me, if you look at the labels of the bottles, the third wine in, the Chardonnay, you know, it's Le Grand Noir, Chardonnay, you know what you're buying. You may not know whether it's oaky or not oaky or whatever, you know Chardonnay. The Georgian wines are impenetrable. That's deliberate, because they can't be penetrable, they're Georgian grapes and so on. However, the back label does explain something. I am going to rely on people like you, sommeliers and other people, to do the selling. And I think we, as producers, and that's going to be part of the picture of who's going to survive, we are going to have to work harder with our distributor to make that work. So if that means coming to you and saying, hey, you can actually serve some by the glass, you can do some sampling, you can give people a little bit of a taste, so to find out whether they like it or not, that's, I think, what we need to do. But we need to do that as an industry. We need to say, here's a wine from Mallorca. You don't know what Mallorca is like. Do you like this? Do you not like it? We can't expect people to give us 15, 16, 20, 30 euros for a bottle of liquid that they've got no idea what it tastes like, and take it home and maybe have a bad time. We need to be much better at saying you've had a tiny little bit of some Mallorcan wine, you've fallen in love with it, you haven't fallen.
How many people is in your tasting panel when you select these blends?
We're very democratic, we have 2 people. And sometimes we have 50%, quite often it's a 50-50. No, I like the idea, by the way, of bigger panels, and in the future I'd like to do that, but we're just beginning. This is just literally, this is the first and second time. Can I quickly ask as well, and if you're listening, I hope you got the impression, I would like honest comments on the zero alcohol.
Feels dry because as a sommelier and a buyer, the problem is the sugar, because the sugar makes everything funny. Really it's not combining. The thing is, like now the project coming up, I'm looking for can you do a wine like a drink menu with non-alcoholic drinks, and of course with the pairing, but it's going to be not focused on this kind of like it's not going to be a menu place. So, like, you can easily pair with like 3 or 4 wines in a row, and it's a whole menu. You can just enjoy those 3 or 4 wines, and that's whole. But we've been discussing, could you do that with non-alcoholic?
Heidi and I have a friend in Sweden who has a restaurant, sommelier to a restaurant where they have an alcoholic, they have wines, and they have cocktails. There's 1 list of wines, 1 list of cocktails, and 1 list of non-alcohol. And Sarah Norell from Systembolaget told me she and her husband went there, and they didn't do the non-alcohol, they did the cocktails and the wine. And she said some of the cocktails went better with the foods than the wines, and so not critical of that, but they really worked. We are going to see, with the zero alcohol sparkling teas, with the wines, and potentially even with a beer, a non-alcoholic stout, for example, yes, you could do it today, and you'll do it better tomorrow. But can I just pick up on what you said? We have had the description of this as being a gastronomic zero alcohol. That's the idea. Now, there are 1 or 2 downstairs, by the way, that fit that model as well, and I'd like to say that Emma, I think they're doing a really nice job with their white, which I hadn't tasted before. There are a lot of them. Too many at the moment are too sweet. And from the beginning, we set ourselves 2 hurdles. One was we would do 0.0, not 0.5. It's much easier to do 0.5. And secondly, we want it to be dry. This isn't dry. It isn't bone dry, and there are some wines with less sugar than this. Absolutely, I admit that. But I wanted to you have a dry impression, because to go with food, that's hard. Any other comments or?
I'm gonna have to wrap up now
Yeah.
because we're running late. Now, so I will take full responsibility as you now go downstairs to talk to other producers and you start questioning them. So, what's the 15% in this wine? Is it?